Somewhere along your path of awakening, maybe after a deep insight or a personal collapse, you sensed something shift. You pierced the illusion, noticed the patterns, the noise, then came silence. At first, it felt powerful, even liberating. But slowly, the sense of meaning faded. Not all at once, but gradually, quietly. As if your soul turned down the volume on life and forgot to turn it back up. You stopped striving. You stopped caring, not recklessly, but with that quiet, existential exhale. Then a question began to whisper louder. Why do I feel numb now that I finally see the truth? There's a strange paradox here. We expect spiritual awakening to ignite us. But for many, especially the sensitive, the introspective, the seekers, it does the opposite. It empties us. I remember speaking with a friend, brilliant, spiritually awake, immersed in Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. She had a massive breakthrough after a dark night of the soul. She saw through the illusion of ego, identity, achievement. And yet, 2 months later, she was staring at the ceiling, barely able to move. I used to cry over not doing enough, she said. Now I don't care if I do anything at all. I thought awakening would light me up, not leave me like this. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, hinted at this long ago. He didn't use spiritual jargon, but he deeply understood what happens when the unconscious becomes conscious. Jung said, enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Sounds poetic, until you grasp what it means. Awakening isn't a finish line. It's the start of a psychological death, the death of who you thought you were. The structures that gave life meaning, goals, roles, relationships, even your sense of time, collapse. But here's the thing. Jung would tell you the ego isn't gone. It's disoriented. It lost its map. And without a new one, motivation dissolves. So it's not that you're lazy or depressed, you're simply in limbo. You've woken up from something, but haven't yet awakened into what's next. And that space, misunderstood by most, isn't failure. It's not clinical depression. It's sacred. Ancient. Jung warned that modern society avoids this phase at all costs. This sacred pause, this in-between, is essential for becoming your true self. But no one talks about this part, do they? And that's exactly what we're diving into next. What's truly happening in your psyche post-awakening, and how losing motivation might be the most powerful upgrade your soul is undergoing, if you can see it for what it is. Before we go deeper, if you're someone who loves to expand your mind and explore the unseen layers of life, be sure to subscribe to Stoic Trench. This space exists to illuminate the invisible and support those navigating the strange, beautiful path of awakening. If you've been drifting in the fog of post-awakening and wondering where your spark went, you're not broken. You're undergoing a psychological transformation that most people don't have a name for. A change that rewires your entire operating system. The goals you once chased, the to-do lists, the 5-year plans, the hustle playlists, they don't move you anymore. Not because you're failing, but because your motivational engine is being dismantled. And Jung saw this coming long before it became a hashtag. For most of your life, your drive came from ego, the identity you believed was you. You wanted success, approval, validation. That's not wrong. It's human. Jung called this your persona, the social mask you wear. But awakening strips that mask. Suddenly, you're not trying to impress anyone, because you see the game. And once you see it, it stops making sense. Your old goals don't fit anymore. They were made for a version of you that no longer exists. It's like stepping off stage mid-performance. You forget your lines, but more than that, you realize the play doesn't resonate. That's why you feel unmotivated. You didn't lose your drive, you outgrew the fuel. Jung believed we're not here to serve the ego, but to integrate it. To align it with something deeper. He called this individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not the small self that craves validation, but the deeper self that's connected to all things. And this self doesn't care about status or perfection. It cares about truth. So once the awakening happens, your psyche starts rejecting everything fake, forced, or performative. Jobs, relationships, even your Pinterest dream board from 2021. That's why awakening feels both liberating and destabilizing. But Jung warned, if we stop here, we get stuck. Some awaken and fall into spiritual bypassing, believing nothing matters, so they detach, drift, and shut down. They confuse detachment with disengagement. But the true self wants to live through you, not escape the world, but reshape your role in it. To step into that, you must pass through a strange middle phase that few recognize. It's not pretty. It's not Instagrammable. It looks like this: silence, stillness, feeling misunderstood while the world keeps spinning. Jung would say you're not lost. You're between identities. You've disidentified from ego, but haven't yet learned to live from self. And this isn't failure, it's initiation. But in a hyper-productive world, stillness gets mistaken for laziness. So we judge ourselves. And that self-judgment blocks the very energy your soul is trying to reclaim. Jung called this transition an antiodromia, the flip into your opposite. When you awaken, your inner pendulum swings from ego-driven striving to soul-level stillness. From, I must do everything, to, why do anything? And this swing is sacred. It restores balance. In ancient teachings, it's the hermit phase. The death before rebirth. The caterpillar turning to goo. Not a butterfly yet, not even a bug. Just formless potential. And yes, goo doesn't hustle. It dissolves. This is where your ego panics. It wants clarity, identity, momentum. But the self is whispering, let go. I'm building something deeper. Most spiritual content skips this. It tells you to chase joy, stay high vibe. But Jung would tell you, if you bypass the darkness, you miss the gold. Shadow integration, facing the repressed parts of you, isn't extra credit. It's the path to wholeness. This sacred stillness is the moment your unconscious rises. You're not failing. You're metabolizing. And your psyche is wise. It will shut down motivation and clarity on purpose. So you're forced to feel, process, and reclaim what's been buried. That's the real work. And here's the twist. When you stop resisting the void, something stirs. Motivation returns, but it's quieter. Rooted. Soul-led. Less like chasing, more like remembering. Jung called this the emergence of the self, not as an idea, but as an inner compass. And now that you've walked through the void, felt the silence and the stillness, something new is being born. Not a lightning bolt. A quiet pull. Not to return to your old life, but to build a new one. This is when the self speaks. Not in words, but in resonance. In symbols. In nudges. Jung called this the symbolic life, where you live not from personality, but from meaning. And meaning, surprisingly, often feels beautifully ordinary. When the self leads, you don't hustle. You respond. You're not driven by fear. You're guided by alignment. You stop chasing clarity. You recognize it when it shows up. Living from the self doesn't mean constant motivation, it means honest movement. You'll still feel tired, confused, human. But you won't feel that deep inner betrayal, the ache of forcing a life that doesn't fit. Instead, you begin to create even when no one sees. Say no to what looks good but feels off. Follow your curiosity, not your checklist. Choose peace over performance. This is the new fuel. Not adrenaline. Alignment. Jung called this living symbolically, not in fantasy, but with soul. Trusting dreams, synchronicities, gut feelings as guidance. So what does this look like practically? It means asking new questions. Not, what should I do? But, what's quietly calling me? Not, what's the plan? But, where am I being nudged? Not, how do I prove myself? but what feels honest? You stop trying to dominate life, and start dancing with it. And this doesn't kill ambition. It transforms it. Ambition becomes devotion. To truth. To growth. And ironically, this kind of energy creates more impact than ego ever could. But now, it's sustainable. Now, it's soul-powered. This is self-led motivation, not to impress, but to express. And it often leads you to create, serve, heal, teach, not because you have to, but because every cell in you says yes. So if your old spark feels gone, maybe it's because that fire needed to die. So a deeper flame could rise, one that won't flicker with every gust of life. Jung never promised this would be easy. But if you're still here, you're already walking that deeper path. This isn't about reclaiming old motivation. It's about discovering a new one, rooted not in performance, but in wholeness. This isn't the end of your awakening. It's the beginning of your becoming. If this spoke to you, if it helped name something you've been silently carrying, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And if you want more content exploring the intersection of psychology, soul, and real-world awakening, subscribe to Stoic Trench. Because awakening isn't the final chapter. It's where the true story begins.